At Drummond Golf, we understand your passion.
Nice roll.
And that's because every Drummond Golf store is owned and run by a local who loves the game as much as you do.
Yeah, it's come off the face really well.
Someone who knows where you play and what you need.
Oh yeah, looking good.
With Australia's biggest range and expert knowledge.
Great. Now let's try that putter with this grip.
So if you want to improve your game, see a local expert at Drummond Golf.
Hello and welcome to episode 83 of The Thing About Golf, Golf Australia magazine's ongoing search for the answer to that eternal question, what is the thing about golf? My name's Rod Murray, and normally at this time I'd be joined by my colleague John Huggan to introduce an episode that he has recorded. Unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, I haven't been able to catch up with Huggy, so I'm flying solo for this introduction. On the upside, that means it'll be shorter to listen to and get you more quickly to what is a fascinating chat with Sky Sports commentator Ewen Murray, unquestionably one of the most familiar voices in the game. Like so many of his TV commentary brethren, we often forget Murray was a player long before he stepped into the booth. But that background is very much at the forefront of this chat with Huggy, which we'll get to now. Enjoy.
Okay, here we go. Welcome to the latest Thing About Golf podcast. My latest guest is sitting opposite me here, and we'll have one of the most familiar voices, I think, to anybody who's certainly watched golf on Sky Sports over the years. Ewen Murray, what was the thing about golf for you?
I think the joy of playing a sport that had everything right about it. I think it's a sport you can play from a young kid, starting at 6-7 years of age, and God willing, you're healthy enough, you can play up until your 80s, and the social side of it as well. I mean, there's so many great things about the game of golf, but that for me is what golf's all about, is being with people, the people you want to be with, the fun you have, the good times, the many bad times you have in golf.
Yes, we'll get to that. Yeah. But you were born into golf, literally, almost, weren't you? I mean, your dad was very, certainly in the Edinburgh, you're a very famous teaching pro.
Yeah, my father was born in Arbroath, just north of St Andrews, and he met my mother at Glen Eagles, where he was the assistant pro, and my mother worked in the hotel. Right. She was from the Outer Hebrides, and they moved to Edinburgh, and he was there for 35 years. Taught a lot of good players, a lot of good amateurs. Yeah. In Scotland, and well-respected club professional. But life was tough. Club professional didn't make an awful lot of money in these days. You were, I wouldn't say on the bread line, but you didn't have much extra after it.
Yeah. So, what was your introduction to it then? I mean, did he teach you? I mean, it's always difficult, the father-son dynamic. I mean, how did that figure out with you?
Yes, I started playing when I was about 5. Yeah. And my father was my only teacher until he passed away in 1985. No one else. Mm-hmm. His word was gospel.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Was often the way in these days. Yeah. Fairly strict upbringing. Wonderful childhood. Because if I wasn't at school or playing football, I was on the golf course. Right. And of course I was safe there. Yeah. And I was there all the daylight hours.
Yeah, they never had to worry about where you were, obviously.
No, and when he locked up at night and I wasn't back, he would walk out with my mother, right, and say, look, it's time you were going home. Right. In the summer evenings, it was light until 10:30.
Right, yeah.
So you were at the golf course from 8 in the morning until 10:30.
Yeah. And you were a bit of a prodigy, for want of a better word, as a boy golfer. I mean, when did it become clear that there was some talent there?
I played in my first tournament when I was 10 at a place called Ratho Park in Edinburgh, and Bernard Gallagher won it. Oh, it was the Redmond Trophy.
I hope you were second, right?
Bernard was 16. I had 2 92s of 24 handicap at 10, and that was my first prize. I got a £2 voucher, which was enough to buy a lot of golf balls in these days.
Absolutely. Yeah. And obviously you progressed quite quickly, because I mean you were winning national championships by the time you were 15. I mean,
15, I got beaten in the final of the British boys at Hillside.
Yeah. Have you forgiven Ian Gradwell yet?
I got beat from Ian Gradwell. I was 1 up and 2 to go in the 36-hole final, but I was 4'10".
Right.
I was really quite small as a kid. And I hit 3 woods to the 17th, the par 5.
Yeah.
I hit 2 drivers at the last and didn't reach the par 4. And Ian finished with 2 4s.
Right.
He held a big putt at 17, and he was on in 2 at the last. So that was the first time I'd ever been out of Scotland.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. But I mean, well, how good were you at that stage? You're being very modest here, because I mean, your record as a boy golfer. I mean, I wasn't going to bring up the fact that you were, but I will. The first player ever to win the Scottish Boys Match Play and Stroke Play at the same time. I wouldn't bring up who was the second player to do that, but you take it from there.
Only the chosen few, John.
Indeed. Yes.
The following April, I won the Scottish Boys. I was 29 under par in April on North Berwick, which is quite good.
That's impressive.
I was beginning to have putting problems at that time.
Even then?
I remember the day it happened. I was 15, and it happened at a place called Long Nidri.
Right.
And I hit 2 shots onto the first green fairly close, and I thought, well, I'll knock this in, get off to a birdie start. And something happened. There was a mishap between the brain and the hands. And I went through a very difficult 2 months. I didn't want to play golf.
Right.
Because I couldn't get the ball in the hole from a foot.
Right.
And somehow I got over that. And when I won the Scottish Boys at North Berwick, I was using a putting style that was derived by Paul Trevelyan,
Yes.
where the right hand was nearly on the putter.
See, I didn't know that. Yeah.
And the left hand was at the top of the shaft.
Yeah.
And I looked like a giraffe.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I was okay from 10 feet and longer.
Yeah.
But the closer I got, and I mean close, I mean 9 inches, it became quite difficult.
Yeah.
And to give you an instance, when the stroke play was at Lanark, lovely course, lovely moorland course, and I was 5 in front playing the last hole, which was a par 3, and I hit it to about 5 feet. So I've got a putt to win by 5 or 6, and I 3-putted it. No pressure.
Yeah.
And that was a bit of a problem. Then I went to America to play in the World Junior.
Yeah, San Diego. Yeah.
At La Jolla, And I had the same problem there, and yet managed to win.
Well, you won the overseas part of that, didn't you?
The overseas part. It was called the International Trophy or something.
Yeah.
I think Craig Stadler won the main one.
Right.
And then I played in my last amateur event at Carnoustie, which was the Crow's Nest Classic.
Right.
And I was like the guy that shot Bambi's mum, because I beat David Gregg.
Oh.
And David Gregg was Mr. Carnoustie.
No mean feat at that time, yeah.
Yeah, he was a wonderful golfer, and more than that, he was a wonderful person as well.
He beat Faldo famously in the Home Internationals.
Yeah.
Playing for Scotland. Yeah.
Well, to beat him was a big thing. And to win at Carnoustie, near where my father was brought up, was quite important. But as I say, we didn't have much money in these days, and I couldn't see myself winning these things again. And I thought maybe this is the time to turn professional. And my father was dead against it.
Really?
And he was right, because I was small, not very strong, didn't hit the ball a long way, had an amazing short game,
Yes.
chipping in,
Yeah.
bunker playing.
Yeah.
But then I still had the putting problem, and that was always in the back of my mind. And the first shot I hit as a professional was at Prestwick. And it was windy, it was November.
Yeah.
It was in a winter league or something match. And I hit a 2-iron, and Frank Rennie's shot shielded the wind.
Yes.
But as it sailed past the edge of the shop and the clubhouse, it dived off to the right, over the wall, into a cold trap, bound for Newcastle. And I thought, welcome to the professional
The
world.
longest 2-iron ever hit.
Maybe this isn't as easy as I thought.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested in the putting part of it, though. I mean, was it a physical thing, a mental thing? I mean, how did it play out?
It's something, John, I'm very ashamed of, that you weren't.
Well, you're hardly unique. I mean, there's been plenty of examples of that. I mean,
Well, Langer was the same.
Aye.
I played with Langer in the Dutch Open, and the first 9 holes he hit 8 greens in par and 1 in under par, and he was out in 44. and he took a divot out the 9th green from about 4 feet.
Really?
So I knew how he was feeling.
Yeah.
I wasn't that bad, and he was in tears. And I remember coming in and speaking to Jock McVicker and saying, I've just played with one of the best players I've seen, but we're never going to hear of him because he can't get the putter back.
Yeah.
And of course the rest, you know.
Well, yeah.
An amazing career, but he obviously had the mental strength to get over that. And I'm quite ashamed and embarrassed that I didn't find a way.
Well, you say that, but you coped with it for a while. I mean, I was looking up your record, and you must be the only man who's ever won the Zambian Open, the Nigerian Open, and the Northern Open. I would imagine that's fairly unique. But you played in Opens, and you finished a lot of top tens in tournaments and things. I mean, you found a way to make it work to an extent, surely.
I met Orville Moody, who won the US Open in '69.
Yeah.
And Orville had a putter up the inside of his left arm.
Yeah.
And I was having a bit of trouble, and I was playing with him and Tommy Bolt. I mean, two great players.
Yeah.
Bolt was the US Open champion '58, and he was 62 years of age then, but still a very good player.
Yeah.
And Orville said, look, I'm going home, I've got a few of these. Take this putter, work with it, and it'll help you. It won't make you Ben Crenshaw or nothing like that, but it'll help you. So I got that putter in '78, but '77 I won the Northern Open, and it was the same story as the Scottish boys stroke play. I was 5 in front coming up the last. Royal Dornoch, I mean, what a place to win.
Yeah.
And I hit 2 drivers that were made by my boss then, Harry Busson, at Wilton Heath.
Oh, wonderful clubs.
Yeah, they were fantastic. And I hit it to about 4.5, 5 feet. So I've got a putt to win by. Same story.
Yeah.
6 inches short, 5 inches wide to the right, not even a stroke.
Right.
And that week I had James Braid's putter that Harry had taken out of the glass case in the clubhouse and said, look, whatever you do, don't
break it, yeah.
And yes, that was another thing. I was a bit of a hothead as well.
Yeah.
And I had this blade putter that Braid had won all the various things with Open Championships a lot. But I just shuffled it forward, and yet I had 5, 6 putts to win.
Yeah. So what did that feel like then? Can you remember?
Well, Ronnie Shade had stayed up because I didn't have a car then. He'd stayed up, he'd finished earlier, and he was going to drive me home. Now, it should have been a joyous evening, driving home in his Datsun 280 ZX.
Right.
Because you've won a tournament, you've won it at Dornoch, you've won it well. £1,000 I had in my pocket, which was enough to put a deposit on a flat in London.
Yeah.
And,
not anymore.
But it wasn't, because of the manner in which I finished it off. If I'd missed the putt and it had lipped out, absolutely fine.
Yeah.
But it was such a feeble effort. And like golfers, you remember the bad things.
Yeah.
You never remember the good things you did. And obviously, over 4 rounds, there was some good things.
Obviously, you must have done a lot of good, yeah, exactly.
I mean, it was sleet, because it was played in April, and there was sleet in the morning, and I shot 69, which was the best by 6.
Yeah.
And I had this handsome lead to take in. So all the good things that happened, I sort of ignored them, and I centred on the putt at the last.
Yeah.
But the following year, I got the one up the arm, and I wouldn't say I was tremendous, but I could find a way of getting the ball in the hole.
Yeah.
Still wasn't pretty.
Yeah. So how do you look back on that then? I mean, your playing career as a pro, do you feel frustrated, underachieved?
Definitely underachieved.
Yeah.
When I look at some of the scores that I shot as 15 and 16-year-old playing with the old equipment on good golf courses. I mean, La Jolla was a tough course as well. The north and south there was tough. And I looked at the scores and I thought, well, you must have done something right. I mean, you couldn't just be hopeless and shoot 65 and 6 and whatever. But yeah, underachieved. I did win in Sierra Leone and Gambia as well, which was almost sand courses.
Right.
but ball striking was obviously very important because there was no preferred lie, so then you played from where it was. Nigeria was also almost a sand course in Ikoyi. Zambia was a big one because that was a really good golf course and a long golf course at that time, long and tight. And I had 67 greens out of the 72 and won that by 3.
It's a credit to your dad's teaching, if nothing else.
Yeah, he obviously got very frustrated with me because he couldn't understand why you've got this problem from 12 inches.
Yeah.
I mean, you go down and see a grandmother on the putting green at North Berwick or the Himalayas at St Andrews, and she'll go up to a 2 foot and just tap it in. And here was me winning international events, putting together good scores, but couldn't guarantee I could get in the ball in the hole from 12 inches.
Was it the kind of case where I've heard some people talk about this, where they miss one and it's almost a relief, and they're almost fine after that? Or did it get worse for you?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No,
Oh, well.
it wasn't that easy.
No. I'll just miss one and I'll be fine. Yeah, no.
I finished third in the Tournament Players' Championship in 79, and I finished third in the Bob Hope, both on the same course at Moore Park, which had really fast greens. And I was better on fast greens. I was better when I didn't have to hit it.
Right.
And my big win, money-wise, came in Nigeria. And I topped the money list of a safari tour. Got me into the Open, which was a big thing.
Yeah.
Because I'd lost 5 playoffs in pre-qualifying.
Really?
I found pre-qualifying so stressful because I desperately wanted to play in the Open.
Yeah.
And my first Open, I was 18 at Troon, which I played the 4 rounds there, the one Weisskopf won. But the money in Nigeria made life a lot easier for me. I could then buy a third house, and I'd made money on the others.
Right.
So I had a bit of security.
Yeah.
But I got divorced. I'd only been married a year to a lovely girl who lives in New Zealand now. She was a pro golfer.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
Stephanie Jullett.
Yeah.
She was a really lovely girl. It just was never going to work out. It wasn't her fault, it wasn't my fault. But we needed to part.
Yeah.
And then my father died. All at the same time.
Yeah.
And I a bit of me died with him because I always felt he was someone to lean on.
Yeah.
If
And you were kind of doing it for him a little bit, were you? Did you
definitely
feel like
in
that?
Nigeria because they give him 3 weeks to live. And he lasted about 15 months. But he was 4 stone at the end of that.
Cancer, was it?
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much all over.
Yeah.
But he didn't want to go, and he was as sharp as a tack. And I used to fly up every Tuesday from London to Edinburgh and spend Tuesday with him, and then fly back and then go to the tournament the next day. And it all got a little bit stressful and sad because I'd spent so much time with my parents.
Yeah.
And I was one of these lucky guys that had 2 loving parents. And that stands you in good stead later on in your life. You don't think that then, but you know now.
Yeah.
So part of me went with him, and then it became a real struggle. I was playing in company golf days. Thankfully, Tommy Horton and Brian Barnes, Malcolm
You were
Gregson.
a British Caledonian thing?
Yeah,
You
I was
involved in
part of
that?
their team. They had a team of 12. Jack Newton was one of them
Right,
as well.
there you go. Sure, you learned a few things from Jack, did you?
I did. I'm not sure all of them sort of stood me in great stead throughout but he was a wonderful guy to be with as well, and a positive, really positive mind, and a fabulous golfer, obviously. So I did these company golf days that sort of kept me going, because I didn't have any money once I got divorced. That was the end
That's
of
how
it.
it works. I can testify to that, yes.
I hope she's well. I mean, she really was a lovely person. But I then played in these golf days, and I played in South America again for about 6 weeks. I played in Africa and made a little bit, not much, but a little bit. And then it was time at Glen Eagles in the Scottish Open of 1990. That was me. I was putting left-handed by then. Which I never had any problem, but the trouble is with my wrong eye looking at the ball, I had no idea where I was aiming.
Yeah.
So I was striking these putts beautifully, wide of the hole.
Yes. Before we move on from your pro career, I want to talk a little bit more positively about some of the characters and guys that you played with. I mean, you must have experienced playing with some of the real top guys.
I played with some great guys. The first time I played with Arnold Palmer was in 75 at the Manga, which he won. And I'd led the pre-qualifiers, so if you did that, you got a decent draw. But he was me 20, playing with the great Arnold Palmer. And he was wonderful. And he became a lifelong friend. I played with him again in Brazil about 3 or 4 years later, and he won that as well. Mm-hmm. He had 5 2s the last round and 2 7s. I mean, that was typical Arnold.
Yeah.
Gary Player, I formed a strong friendship with through golf days in Norfolk. Mm-hmm. Strangely enough, I mean, I'm from Johannesburg and he from Edinburgh, but we did 3 days golf days in Norfolk, and we always kept in touch. And I played with him in the Tournament Players Championship that I finished third in 79. Other ones, if we talk about the Australian players, I mean, I was lucky to live in the era of Bob Shearer.
Lovely man.
Ian Stanley. I mean, Ian Stanley was a one-off.
Yeah.
But gifted.
Yeah. They were quite a group then, weren't they?
Yeah, and Bob Shearer and Jack Newton married 2 Piccadilly girls.
Yes.
Which they met at the Piccadilly Medal at Fenham Park, and that was Sam Towns' first victory on the European Tour then. Yeah. So I was lucky with them. Stuart Ginn was another one I was very close to. Mm-hmm. And we used to share a room to cut the expenses. So these sort of players, Johnny Miller I played with in the Open at St Andrews in 84, Hale Irwin in 78 when I had it out of bounds at the last.
Lovely. How did you manage that?
20,000 people, final day of the Open, and really struggling. I wasn't playing very well at that point.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I'll tee it down, so I'll just cut it down.
Squeeze it up there, yeah.
And it bounced on Granny Clark's wine and out you go, down to Walden House and the old woolen mill.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I was lucky. I played with some fabulous players. Bobby Locke was another one I played with, funny enough.
Tell me about him. I mean, everybody talks about what a great putter he was and the big hook on every shot. And
I'd first seen Bobby Locke at the Open in 71 at Birkdale. And in 72, I played a 2-round Pro-Am with him that was organised by my management company in Walsall, of all places.
Yeah, that great golfing hotbed.
Yeah, and I used to say he aimed a bit right.
Yeah.
And of course, you stand on the tee, and I looked at him and I thought, he's aiming at me.
Yeah.
He's just going to skirt me on the right-hand side. Yeah. And it was an education. Just watching him, the control he had with short irons, drawing the ball in, because he had quite a steep downside. Because he aimed right, by the time he turned his body onto the target, the club was quite steep.
Yeah.
So he could get the ball to spin back comfortably with wedges, even mid-irons. And his putting was just outstanding. Yeah. But he was a gentleman.
Yeah, I went out and watched him, and I'm impressed by my 12-year-old self that I did this at Muirfield in the Open in 72. I watched Bobby Locke play the front 9 holes at Muirfield, and he shot 37 with 11 putts. Because by that time he couldn't reach some of the holes.
Sure.
But it was an education to watch how he got the ball round. 37 with 11 putts is pretty good.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah. But he was another one. Tommy Bolton, Orville Moody, I mentioned. Trevino was another one because he was part of my management group.
Mm-hmm. He was a genius, wasn't he? Is that too strong a word?
Yeah. No, a genius is a word that's used too often. It's a bit like legend.
Yeah.
But there's very few of them. Mm-hmm. But Trevino was one of them.
Yeah.
I mean, he could do anything with a golf ball. He could make a golf ball talk.
Yeah.
And he had all this chat. It was wonderful. He was different from the rest. He was a character.
Yeah.
And he had the game to back up the character. So he was another one. I was just very lucky. I just played with a lot of decent players, and all the decent players on the European Tour over 20 years. But Bob Shearer was one of my favourite guys to play with. Mm-hmm. Mike Clayton, I know he's a good friend of yours.
He's arriving today, believe it or not.
Oh,
yes.
I must see him. I did see him earlier in the year, actually. But I enjoyed playing with Mike Clayton. He was a fine golfer, really good golfer.
Yeah, still is.
Yeah, maybe it didn't believe he was as good as he was.
Yeah. It's a bit of a temperament issue there, here and there.
Little
perhaps.
hot, little bit hot. Excuse me. Certainly, at times there was a bit of steam came out there, but then we were all different.
Yeah.
But he was good company.
Yeah, I could do a podcast probably on just my experiences caddying for Mike Clayton. That would be a podcast by itself. But anyway, Ewan, so you're done. You've decided that's the end of it. What are you going to do with yourself after that? Are you kind of looking around for something?
Well, I had moved down to West Sussex because I needed to be attached to a golf club. And I'd been at Walton Heath for 16 years. Though obviously when I lost my tour card in 89, it's no good having a tour player who hasn't got a tour card. So I had to say goodbye to Walton Heath, which was a huge part of my life, my learning process.
Mm-hmm. It's a wonderful place. Yeah.
But yeah, and the members were outstanding, and some of them very prominent in the political world. And
Yeah.
when you go back, Winston Churchill and Lloyd George were members there.
Really? Wow.
And James Braid obviously was a big part of Walton
One of the
Heath.
great practice putting greens, I always think, at
Yeah.
Walton Heath, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and it was always in beautiful condition. I loved my time there, and I grew up there. I went from a kid to a boy to a youth to a man,
Yeah.
because I left home at 18. So leaving there was a big blow. And I'd met Nikki, my wife, 10 years before. She was in another relationship then, and we got together and moved down to West Sussex, and I was attached to Brian Barnes's course, West Chiltington Golf Club.
Another
which-
character. You've met a few.
Yeah, Max Faulkner owned it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, you've got a Max Faulkner story, I know. Sorry to interrupt you, but
Yes, we'll
tell
come-
your Max Faulkner story when we get to... Don't forget
Yes,
that
we'll
one.
come to Max in a second, but I really wasn't doing anything. I was just doing the odd golf day. Nicky was going up and down to Heathrow to earn the money, and there was a call in Brian Barnes's office, and Brian was having a liquid lunch, which he did now, Nicky,
Yes.
and I'd had the sort of starters with him,
Right.
and I thought, well, I better answer the phone because he's struggling here.
Yeah.
And I recognised the voice on the end of it. It was a chap called Andrew Miller, a Scot. And he was the director of the Emirates Golf Club, which had just started.
Right.
And he said, is Brian about? And I said, well, no, he's a bit busy. He's in a meeting at the minute.
Yes.
And I said, can I give him a message? And he said, well, we need someone to do the commentary. The Dubai Desert Classic, which was the second one, in 1990. I said, I'll do that.
You just came out with it, did you?
I'd had a couple of glasses of wine.
Yes.
And
Emboldened
yes.
is the word.
And he says, well, would you? And I said, yeah. And I thought, hang on a minute, I've never done this before.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he said, we'll send you a ticket. And how does 500 quid sound for the week? And of course, I didn't have anything.
No.
So
So it sounded pretty good then.
it sounded wonderful.
Yeah.
It was sweet music.
Yeah.
So I went there. And the television crew were Arabic. It was a channel called Channel 33. It was a satellite channel. And Hamid Mubarak was the director. And he said, oh, pleased to meet you. He says, thought we'd just have a chat before the week. He says, we haven't done golf before. I thought, oh, yeah. Now, is this the time to tell him that I haven't done this before?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we were joined by a chap called Richard Coram, who was the manager of the Human League.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
And he had a radio program in Dubai. And he was going to be the presenter.
Right.
So,
You couldn't make this story up.
I mean, you can see
Yeah.
this is like a big pot with
Yes.
a whole load of ingredients going in. And Richard said, I haven't presented before. So I was thinking of Genesis, and then there were three.
Yeah.
We've got one who hasn't covered it, one who hasn't spoken about it, and one who's never presented.
Yeah. What could possibly go wrong?
So they said, well, what do we do? And I said, well, you get a bit of music and a few moody pictures to start with. And that usually lasts about 30 seconds. And then up pumps Richard.
Yeah.
And he does his bit, and then he hands over the commentary, and away we go. So the pictures came up, and I've still got them. The most stunning pictures I've seen produced in television. And I said, you'll need some music. And I was thinking of the three who'd never done it before, and I thought the way it was with Bruce Hornsby in the range.
Well, there you go.
Oh, that's the way it is.
Yeah.
So we put that over it, and the pictures dissolved, and they were just beautiful, and the words fitted perfectly over the pictures. Up pumped Richard, off he went, over to commentary. And I've said whatever I've said. You've got to say something.
Yeah.
And then I see the picture, and all I saw was the right hand and the club shaft at the top of the backswing, and then both hands in the club shaft on the through swing, but no sign of the ball or the player. So after about 2 hours, Hamid said, everything okay? I said, well, we kind of need to see where the ball goes. And, oh, we're not allowed on the other side of the ropes. Oh, I said, yeah, that's not a problem. And also you need to get 1 or 2 platforms built so you can look down.
Yeah.
And it'll be easier to follow the ball then. By Saturday, the ball never left the middle of the screen. Everything was as good as it is today.
Right.
And I said, how do you manage to do that? He says, well, we cover the Dakar Rally, camel racing, and he says, all of that's very quick. So he says, we don't have a problem with that. We just didn't know that we could go onto the golf course.
Right.
And I had all this Arabic talk back. I mean, I was nearly fluent in Arabic by the time Sunday came. But I thought it was wonderful. And I was on my own.
Yeah.
6 hours a day. But I knew all the players.
Yeah.
Because I'd just finished.
Yeah.
So I knew who everyone was. I
You knew
what
things
they'd done.
about them. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and little things, and when he won in here, and little bits like that. And I went back, and about 2 weeks later, Sky had just started, and their sports station was Eurosport. And they bought the pictures and the commentary from Dubai, because they needed as much action as they could get. And then they rang up and said, look, would you like to go down to Las Brisas and do our golf coming from there, which was the beginning of European Tour Productions, which I did, but I only did 2 days because I'd agreed to play in the Chilean Open down in Santiago, which I did. Peter German actually did the commentary for the Saturday, Sunday. And then I thought, that's stupid, what am I doing going all the way to Chile when I'm not really very keen to play because I'm not very good at it anymore.
Yeah.
And I came back and they gave me a 3-month trial. And part of the trial was I had to sit in the gallery for the days I didn't work. So I knew what a producer did, knew what a director did,
Right.
knew what videotape people did. The girls would count backwards in your ears. And he says, you need to understand all of these things because you're just a small part of that. You know, don't ever think that commentators the be-all and end-all because they're the workers.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that supply you with what you need. So I spent 3 months at tournaments doing commentary and in the gallery, in the studio. And I was given a producer, a journalist in Birmingham called John Killeen. And he became one of my closest friends throughout life. And we would sit and have dinner in the evening and say, look, I like the way you did that, keep that, but you've got to get rid of this. You know, we've got to knock all the rough edges off you.
Yeah.
You don't need that carry on you were doing there. And John was with me for 2 years.
So how do you sum up commentary then? I mean,
It's changed.
what should you do and what shouldn't you do?
I think you must always be in harmony with who you're with. I think that's very important. But commentary's changed. We won't see any great commentators, I don't think, in the future. We won't see Richie Bennett, or Bill McLaren. James Hunt, I thought, was a wonderful commentator on Formula One.
You don't get the time anymore, do they? Is that part of it?
Timing?
Yeah, I mean the time to actually expand on things because it's all very quick and
It is now.
And now off to the 15th, sort of thing.
It is now, but in these days, you only had 6 or 7 cameras. Now you've got 40.
Yeah.
So obviously the coverage is much quicker.
Yeah.
So you had more time to talk and expand on what you were saying. But I feel nowadays we don't have commentators, we have statisticians who somebody sits in front of a computer, dishes out all these stats, everyone gets the same page, and they all come out and they all sound the same.
Yeah.
And they all use the same language, which the ones I'm talking about, and Peter Ellis is a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
that Peter was an observer.
Yeah.
He looked around the screen and he wasn't really looking at the guy hitting the shot.
Yeah.
Because he was quiet when that was happening.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen nowadays. They talk over shots.
Yeah.
That's not what you do in golf.
No.
And it's not difficult to say, well, he's chosen the driver and he's taken this shot on at 17. Stop.
Mm-hmm.
But then you'll get, oh, of course, he's 14th in strokes gained. No, we don't need that.
No.
Because the guy at home, or sitting on the train watching on his phone nowadays, or iPads or tablets, they actually want to hear the ball struck and see him strike it.
Yeah.
Because that's what you do at the weekend when you play with your mates.
Yeah.
You don't talk over him playing.
Mm-hmm.
But I find that's the way we are now.
Yeah.
You know the feeling when your mate's golf ball flies past yours? Or when you're on the green in regulation, but he holds it from the bunker? At Drummond Golf, we get it. That's why we have our lowest price guarantee. As Australia's biggest, you can count on our massive buying power for the lowest prices in golf. But if you do happen to find a lower advertised price, we'll beat it. The Drummond Golf lowest price guarantee. Unbeatable. Conditions apply.
People would argue, I would argue that it's not as good. I would argue that the game at the top level isn't as good, and I think you've got some feelings on that as well. Certainly in terms of the equipment and the challenge and the courses that we can't play anymore and the distance the ball goes and the one it's far more it's closer to one-dimensional than it's ever been at the top level, I think.
Well, Seve was right. He said if we go down this route of the ball travelling further with less spin and frying pan driver heads, you're going to bring the average player closer to me.
Yeah.
And he wasn't being presumptuous by that. And that's exactly what's happened.
Yeah.
Whereas before we maybe had a dozen top quality players, you look at a tournament now and one of 80 players could win that tournament. That didn't happen in years gone by. And we don't see the shots.
Is that a good or a bad thing? Is that a good or a bad thing?
Oh, I think that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Because I think the game's difficult. And I think the finest exponents find a way to do it.
Yeah.
And we're missing out. You mentioned Trevino earlier. I remember he's second at Woburn when he won the Dunlop Masters. And he hit 3 wood to 3 inches or so. And the way he shaped it down the left-hand side and ran it in off the bank of the bunker. And I think if Faldo's 2-iron at Wentworth at the 15th in the match play, trees changing colour, beautiful pictures, and Faldo having to move it 25, 30 yards in the air. We're 2-iron.
Yeah, we don't see that. It's still possible, though, because just last week, the French Open, the Italian lad, Migliozzi, hit this wonderful shot to the 18th green.
For sure.
And he shaped it left to right. So it can still be done, but we don't see enough of it, I don't think.
No, we don't, because what the modern player does is he would shy away from that. And all credit to Migliozzi for taking it on, because it could have been a disaster, a golfing disaster,
absolutely.
let's say.
Yeah.
You end up overcutting it, and then you got to drop back in the other side. Now you're looking at best of 6. And he took the shot on, and I think that's very important for him in the future. Not the win, but the manner in which he won it.
Yeah.
And that's something we don't see. 90%, I think, would have aimed for the middle of the green. And safety, it's a massive green. So you're not going to miss the green, really, unless you miss it.
Yeah.
And they would have aimed there and 2-putted and then see where that got them. But Migliozzi thought, no, if I make a 3 here, I'm going to make it very difficult.
Yeah.
So we don't see enough of that, John.
I'm not putting words in your mouth here, but is it as much fun to watch as it used to be? Did you play in the best of it, do you think? When Mike Clayton, we mentioned earlier, he puts it really well. I always think that in the era that he played and you played, it was a fair fight between the equipment and the courses.
Definitely.
Now it's gone too much. The equipment beats up the courses. You can't, to the point where you can't use some of the courses. Whereas right back at the beginning, the courses were too tough for the equipment, which was pretty rudimentary. And only when the equipment improved did it become the fair fight that you saw.
The great thing about then was the best player still won.
Yeah.
Because he was the one that could cope with all that.
Yeah.
I look at the Open this year, and okay, we had a very dry summer, and St Andrews was bouncy and dusty, but if the Swilkin band wasn't there, there'd be a 3 wood to hit the middle of the first green.
Yeah.
Cameron Young makes a 2 at the 72nd with a 3 wood and a putt. They're driving the 9th, they're driving the 3rd. Rory McIlroy drove the 2nd.
Yeah.
And if they hadn't hid the pins away, in places we hadn't really seen in Open Championship golf. It was in danger of 58, 59.
Yeah. I thought if the weather had been really good and they hadn't tucked the pins away, like you say, that somebody would have broken 60.
But then others will say to you, well, is that such a bad thing? Well, it is, because the game's tougher than that.
Yeah.
And it was tougher than that. And the players of old still shot 64s and 65s. I mean, it wasn't like they were struggling to get round in 72s or 3s.
Yeah.
But the best players always came through. And without naming anyone now, there are people who win tournaments who, given the previous playing conditions, probably wouldn't win tournaments.
Yeah.
And that's what Seve was saying, that it brought everyone closer together.
Yeah.
And then it becomes putting. And you look at the Open Championship winner, Cameron Smith, fantastic year, really good young player, but a brilliant putter.
Yeah.
And the way he putted on that final day was the putting of a champion. But it came down to that, because everything was driving wedge.
Yeah. On a happier note, talk me through some of the highlights of your commentary career. I mean, what have been the best things to watch? What have been the things that stick most in your mind?
That first week in Dubai still is very fresh in my mind, because I didn't know where we were going from there.
Yeah.
The following year, I did the Ryder Cup at Kiowa on my own. 33 hours. I mean, think of the poor viewer.
Well, that's inhuman punishment for everybody, including you.
The poor viewer having to listen to that. And of course, it was an amazing Ryder Cup. And Seve's argument, and Azinger, and Langer with a putt to win or lose the Ryder Cup, who's had putting problems, and holding the putter against his left arm. And I mean, that was a very special week. I think probably the most special, looking back, was 95, the Ryder Cup. Bernard Gallagher, I was obviously close to, because we grew up very much in the same place, and he'd lost in 91 for the tiniest of margins.
Yeah.
His tail end let him down in 93 with his best players. You'd expect something to come, and it didn't.
Yeah.
And that's the way Ryder Cups go. But two down going into the Sunday singles, Pavin chipping in at Saturday night, and all my mates were playing. You know, Nick Faldo, Howard Clark, Sam Torrance, and all the chaps that I'd played with.
Mark James
was playing. And somehow, Seve went out first, as you know, and he hit one fairway.
Well, I walked that first 9 holes, and it's the most amazing thing I've ever seen on a golf course to this day. I mean,
yeah, he's all square with Tom Lehman
unbelievable.
coming off the 9th green, and he's hit one green and one fairway, and he's all square.
Yeah, I know.
And I don't know if that inspired everyone. I think probably it did, because it was him.
Yeah.
And eventually he got beat 4-3, if I remember rightly. But the boys behind all of a sudden found another gear. Howard Clark holding one against Jacobson. You know, Mark James started to hold putts, which he hadn't done. And at the tail end, we had Per Ulrich Johansson. They just turned out their very best golf. And that was the birth of Sky Sports. That was when they came onto the scene.
Right.
It was their first Ryder Cup, and they were in charge of it. And if they'd messed up, everyone would have said, well, this is not the way it was before.
Yeah.
It was when Butch Harmon joined us at just the right time. And we had a very good team. Bruce Critchley would be well known in Australia. He used to go down there annually and work with several of the commentators there. But that weekend, that Sunday, will probably stand out as the most memorable. I mean, I've made a few mistakes in my life as well.
Yeah. I'm surprised. I mean, even more than Medina. I mean, you know, it's the same kind of scenario. Medina was the one that everybody mentions. You know, I'm surprised.
Yeah, to be there was a great privilege. You know, from the minute Rory got the time wrong and had to get the policeman to take him to the first tee, and was it Luke Donald that led the way there? Was he the guy who went out first? And that was so important. After what Poulter had done on the Saturday evening, it was so important to get up early, because what looked like maybe 12-4 became 10-6 would then become 10-8.
Yeah.
You think, well, hang on a minute, this was never going to happen.
Yeah, if it had gone anything from 10-4, if it had gone any other way, it was done. Yeah.
And Nicholas Colsack's performance that week, and Paul Laurie's performance that week, maybe the slightly unheralded players, when everyone's looking at our top guys.
Yeah.
You've got Olafable as captain, they've got Sevi in the bag. So yes, that was something you'll never forget. 4:00 on Saturday, you were thinking, well, that's, if Steven Spielberg's written this, I think he needs to go for a holiday because there's something wrong with him. Nobody would have believed it.
Yeah.
So that was very special as well. All the Ryder Cups have been special.
Ewan, how do you handle criticism when you see something that you don't like? Is there a line that you have to stay the right side of? I mean, how does that work in TV? Because I mean, I'm a journalist. I think about, I can have a go at people, and you'll be surprised to hear that I have in the past. But broadcasting is different. It's a different form of journalism, and where's the line, and where do you think your line is?
Well, it's more difficult now because you have to be very careful what you say.
Yeah.
Because you're going to upset somebody, but you have to accept that you're going to upset somebody, and as long as it's not rude or derogative. I mean, if you make a mistake, you make a mistake. You don't mean to. But to answer your question in two parts, the first part is that there's a journalist in this part of the world called Ewen Murray.
Yes, I was going to get to him. Yeah, he's a good pal of mine. Yeah, and slightly different spelling than your name, but yeah.
Yes, just the one letter.
Yeah.
But his spelt with an A, mine with an E. So when the criticism comes, Ewen answers it.
Yeah. Well, people fire off tweets to him thinking it's you.
Yeah.
And he I have to say, he's absolutely brilliant at the responses he gives. And I'm glad you find it funny because it could have gone either way at one point.
Well, that's how I handle some of the criticism.
Yeah.
It's passed over to him because they send it to the wrong address.
Yeah.
And he comes back with, you come down the commentary box and I'll stick this microphone where you don't want it.
Yeah.
And then the guy thinks, God, I never thought Ewen Murray was like that. He seems quite calm on television. And he seems a half-decent bloke. And look what he's just sent me.
Yeah.
Well, not me. That's the other guy.
Just so people know, the other Ewen Murray is the golf writer on the Guardian newspaper.
Yes. Yes, funny enough, I was walking the dog the other day and the guy said, I love your column in the Guardian. So I did what Ewan did. I said, thanks very much. That's very kind of you. I've had criticism. It depends who it comes from as well. If it comes from someone you respect and admire, then you look at it and think, well, there must be some truth in this. And early on, I had a bit of criticism from Peter Ellis. It was one. I was lucky to know good commentators who would just say, yeah, you're doing fine. You maybe talk too much, or you don't talk enough. How
about the criticism coming from you? How do you handle that? I mean,
unfortunately, I made a decision never to get too close to players because there was a time I was going to have to say something.
Yeah.
And Monty's a good example of this. A young kid wanted him to sign a ball in France, and Monty said something to him that he probably shouldn't have said. And I said, well, that's unacceptable. Here's a lad who's come to the golf for the day, and I haven't ripped into Monty, but I've let him know that, you can't do this.
Yeah.
And there was another one at the London club when he turned round to one of our cameramen and said, will you stand still? These people are here because of me, not you.
Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
And I was with Bruce, and Bruce was very close to Colin, and another two commentators who just switched the mics on. But that's no good.
Yeah.
Because
you've got a responsibility to step up at that point.
You have. And Monty and I didn't speak for 2 months.
Only 2 months? I went 10 years without talking to him.
Yeah, but you're more resilient than me. And one day we came into the foyer of a hotel, and our eyes were sort of flashing over at each other. And I said, Monty, this is stupid. You're going to be around a long time. I'm going to be around a long time. Yeah. We've got to sort this.
Yeah.
He became one of my closest friends. Mm-hmm. I wrote him a letter. I went to his house for dinner when he was up at Gleneagles, and we became very close. And then, of course, he becomes a partner. He becomes your co-commentator at the major tournaments, which is why you should never let You should never let these things get to you. You should nip them in the bud.
Yeah.
The worst one was probably Tiger in Dubai when he spat on the 12th green, 4 feet from the hole, 3 groups behind him. And I remember I said something like, for someone who's so inspirational, not just in golf, but in any sport, there are times when he can become petulant and arrogant. And what he's done there is as low as it gets.
Yeah.
And Howard Clark was with me at the time, and I switched his button off. I said, leave it, because then you'll get involved.
Yeah.
Just wait until the picture changes, and that'll be it. And you just let that comment hang.
Yeah.
Well, the hate mail I got after that.
I can imagine.
Don't bother coming back to America, because we've got your back and all this stuff. Tiger never spoke to me from that day, and I was very close to him because Butch Harmon was his coach. Some mornings I'd get up in the majors at 4 or 5 o'clock, be at the golf club at 6 for 9 holes with him. And I would never get involved with what Butch and he were doing, but I'd walk round the edge of the fairway and we'd meet up at the tees and then let them have their time. And he was the most immaculate young man, Tiger, manners-wise, caring-wise. But after what happened in Dubai, he's never, ever spoken to me again.
Well, I've got a Tiger story. I can't tell it on a podcast. It involves words.
I think I know which one
It
it
involves
is.
words. It happened in Abu Dhabi, but that's all I can say for the purposes of this, unfortunately. But yeah, he doesn't take well to criticism, it must be said.
No, and not getting back to what I said earlier, I made up my mind never to get too close to players. I mean, I did coach a couple of players, in Darren Clark and Gary Evans for a total of 11 years. But I said to them, look, if you mess up on the golf course and misbehave, you realise I'm not going to cover for you.
Yeah.
And they said, oh, it'll never happen. And thankfully it never did.
No.
But I enjoyed that time of my life as well. A difficult time for Darren, obviously. You know, his kids were 8 and 6 when his wife Heather passed away at the age of 38. And I spent a lot of time with Darren, and not so much on the course, but at his house and sorting things out and seeing a way forward. And all of a sudden he was a single dad, and Darren was never cut out for that.
No.
But somehow succeeded.
But yeah, it's a difficult line. I mean, I've got players who I would regard as friends of mine, but you don't set out to do that. I mean, I always think, well, if you can get their respect, that's in a friendly, professional relationship, that's as much as you can ever hope for, I think.
Well,
or ever aspire to, really.
That's what happened with Cullen. And there was someone else I had a bit of a spatter with as well. But Cullen was the main one.
Yeah, but you're not doing your job properly if you don't fall out with them now and again, I think. Certainly in my role as a journalist.
Well, of all the criticism I got for the Tiger thing in Dubai, I was really quite comfortable. I was upset about it.
But you were right. I mean, you can't be doing what he did.
No.
I mean, it's ridiculous.
No. And of course, he had a habit of spitting when things weren't going too well.
Yeah.
And nobody had mentioned that before.
When do you think that started, the spitting stuff? I mean, I had once said to Jim Furyk about it, because he spits constantly. I said, why are you doing that? He said, he says it's a baseball thing in America. To which my response was, well, I didn't see Jack Nicklaus and Arnold Palmer and Lee Trevino doing it. I mean, it had to start somewhere. It's bizarre.
No, and it probably started with Tiger.
Yeah.
Probably in '96 when he came on. And I think the spit was, that's what I think of that shot. I don't think it was anything more nasty than that. But it's unacceptable for young kids to be watching it.
Yeah, but I mean, if I were growing up where I played at Dunbar, that well, I mean, I'd have been thrown off for doing that.
Definitely. It'd be like throwing paper in the fairway. I mean, you wouldn't do that either. Yeah. But there was a chap wrote to me from somewhere in England, and he said, thank you for what you did, because I was watching with my 7-year-old son, and when Tiger spat, it was about 2:45 in the afternoon, so it would be mid-morning for the guy watching in England. And he said, you've done so much for him and the people he'll play golf with and the people I'll play golf with.
Yeah.
So that softened it a little bit. Sky offered to get involved in because of the threats that were coming through. And I mean, the guy, if he hadn't spat in the green, I wouldn't have said anything.
No.
So I just felt blameless in this. I also said that about the inspiration that he is to millions of people around the world.
Yeah.
And then there's that arrogance and petulance, and that's unacceptable. And it was as short as that.
I mean, if I'd been your boss, I'd have been congratulating you for
Well,
doing
had
that.
I gone home and said nothing,
Yeah,
my boss would have called me in and
Yeah.
said, by the way, Ewan, what are we paying you for?
yeah. Yeah, fair point.
You thought that was okay, did you? So, I mean, if he hadn't spat, it wouldn't have happened. He did, and it did happen. But it was a rough time.
Yeah.
It was a rough year.
Yeah. Right, Ewan, I'm going to make you king for a day here. You're in charge of golf. What would you do with the equipment issues at the top of the game?
I think it's too late to wind everything back, sadly. If I had the chance to do that, I would. But the one thing I would definitely do is I'd bring the driver heads down to the size they were. I would give them a spinning ball, which would still be struck a fair distance by the very best of strikers,
Yeah.
but wouldn't be by the ones who maybe aren't the very best. You know, Gary Player, Nicklaus and Palmer were the big three, and people of our age, a lot of people would have been brought into the game by watching the big three.
Yeah.
All three of them said in the 80s that if you don't watch what you're doing here, you're going to have to lengthen courses. That's what Nicklaus said.
Yeah.
Correct. Gary Player said you're going to have people hitting the ball quarter of a mile. It's happened. Correct. And Arnold Palmer says you're going to take all the fun out of the game. You're going to take all the skill, the art of shaping, not just blackmail Yahtzee from left to right, but
Yeah.
being able to do
Yeah.
complete opposite
Well,
as
they,
well.
they don't do it because they don't have to.
No, they don't. And,
Yeah.
and the PGA Tour have courses that are really not penal. My tournament of the year was Muirfield, the Women's Open.
This year, yeah.
Yeah. I hadn't seen Muirfield like most people hadn't for many years. But the way the girls played Muirfield, they played the course the way it was designed,
Yeah.
because they're hitting into a breeze at the first, they're maybe hitting at 240, 235, 40, which gets you to the corner of the dog leg.
Yeah.
Then you have a long iron, or, like many of them use today, utility clubs, but two proper shots.
Yeah.
The manners of the ladies, the quality of their golf, the way the golf course played, that for me, I know it was the 150th Open at St Andrews, and that was a special week, but that reminded me of how wonderful
Yeah.
golf was.
Yeah, I think the phrase that leaps out at me with what you just said is that they played the course the way it was supposed to be played.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And the men don't do that anymore.
Well, if you look at some of the big hitters today, let's take Bryson DeChambeau, who's found a way to hit the ball a long way. He would stand on that first tee at Muirfield and take a direct line, and if it's in the rough,
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter very much because he's only got 70 yards to go.
Yeah.
It's not a long hole.
No.
440 maybe, somewhere about
Yeah.
there. The second hole would then be drivable.
Yeah.
The third hole would be drivable.
They took it on, yeah.
You know, the fifth's a drive and a sandwich for them
Yeah.
if the wind's from the west. So you're seeing a majestic golf course, one of the top 5 golf courses in the world, and you're seeing it ripped apart and not played the way it was meant to be played.
Yeah.
That really struck home to me that week of the ladies, and I thought the ladies' golf, the quality of their golf was quite outstanding.
Yeah.
If I was CEO of a big company, that's where I would go. There was no swearing, there was no club throwing.
Yeah.
Shaking hands with the scorers, the referees, same at the end. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
They were a credit to the LPGA Tour, the Ladies European Tour, and the game of golf.
It's old world manners, isn't it, really? You don't see that from the
Yeah.
top players, a lot of them,
Well,
without
many
naming it, they're too entitled, they're spoiled, they're told they're special from such an early age that they start to believe it, a lot of them.
Yeah,
And they
I think-
behave in that way, you know.
I know you've also got the manners from the East, you know, from Japan, from China, from Thailand, from Korea. You've got the manners that their countries have.
Respectful,
The
yeah.
respect they have. Like Matsuyama's caddy Shota, you know, I mean, that reduced a lot of people to tears. And yet, it was just good manners
Yeah.
and respect. That's all it was.
Yeah.
But it was so beautifully done.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of that at Muirfield. And I hope the ladies came continues to be.
Well, I'm a huge fan of the women's game, and to the point where I'd much rather watch a women's event now than a men equivalent on most courses, to be honest.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, Muirfield was a great example of that. And all the holes that move a little bit left to right or right to left, they were driving to the knee or the elbow of the dog leg. And then it was right. Do we chase one in low here or because they haven't got the power to descend it all the way past the pin and spin it back. It's not their game.
Because the victims in all of this are the golf courses.
Yes.
They're the biggest victims.
But that's what Nicholas said. When the big three spoke in the 80s, Nicholas said you're going to have to lengthen golf courses. You'll take away the character. The kinks in the dog legs will be in the wrong place, which is also true.
Yeah.
I mean, there is no dog legs for people like Bryson DeChambeau or Dustin Johnson. They just go, and out comes the wedge out of the rough.
Yeah.
The greens are softer.
I think we're going to see this next year at the Masters when they move the tee back at the 13th. This whole thing is summed up for me by that one hole, which at its best is maybe the best hole in the world, given what Bobby Jones called the challenge of the second shot, whatever the phrase was. That's totally gone now. Well, completely eliminated. I mean, what other sport would do that? Would eliminate the best things about it? It's weird.
Well, you could make tennis the way golf is today, but they look at the ball and they fluff the ball up.
Yeah.
But if they gave them a ball that went faster, nobody would watch tennis.
No.
Because nobody would be able to return.
Yeah.
And we should look at that and think, well, maybe we can find a ball that doesn't go as far. But what's the millions of golfers around the world thinking about that? They like the big-headed driver.
I'm only talking about the top level here. Yeah. Whatever it takes to have the punters have more fun, I'm all for that.
But then you've got the people who play golf, the amateurs, who want to play with the same gear as the pros.
Yeah.
Now, if you then say, well, there's a nice new driver for you, like an old persimmon driver, let's say, but maybe metal, whatever, and there's a ball. Now, I got to tell you, you're going to lose 25 yards off the tee. What does the amateur golfer think of that?
Yeah, but that happened. That happened 40 years ago, Ewan. When the whole world except America went from the small ball to the big ball. I remember losing 20 yards. And I didn't see, as Mike Clayton always says, that you don't see millions of people rushing away saying, oh, it's too hard, I can't play golf anymore. That didn't happen.
Well, the American size golf ball, the first Open I played in was the last Open with the 1.62.
Yeah.
In 1973.
74 was the first one with the big ball.
74 was the first one. But, the American ball that we had wasn't like the American ball the Americans had.
No.
I remember the Schweppes at Dunbar.
Yeah, 68. Yeah.
Well, they had a big ball week there.
That's right, they did.
They introduced the big one, of course, it blew 60 miles.
Yeah, that's right.
And Dunbar went from sort of a good chance of 66 to, well, I did quite well today. I got round in 82.
Yeah.
Because the ball was no good.
Yeah.
But then as the years progressed and time evolved, the ball got better. Mm-hmm. And if someone now gave you a 1.62, you just say, no. Because if on the fairway, it would look like it's semi-plugged.
That's right, yeah.
I mean, that was the big thing about the introduction of the big ball. It was bigger, obviously. It looked bigger, and it sat up a little bit better, and it spun more.
Yeah.
I
can still remember, I've still got the newspaper clipping from that event, because I was there as a small child watching it, and Norman Mayer, the great Norman Mayer, was writing in The Scotsman, and Di Rees had driven into a divot, and the quote from Rees was, "Thank goodness we were playing with the big ball. I might have lost it." There was compensations maybe, but not many.
Yeah, but you're right. Nobody moaned.
No,
they just got on with it.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, but that ball was poor. I mean, the first 3 or 4 years.
Yeah,
we used to on the first tee. We used to have a ring.
Yeah.
A metal ring. You'd put the ball through to make sure. That it was the right size.
Yeah.
And the amount that never went through.
Is that right?
I mean, there were more rugby balls than golf balls. And out of 6, you might get 1, maybe 2 if you're lucky, that went through the ring at the right pace.
Yeah. Anyway, Ewan, before we descend too far into old fuddy-duddyism, which I think we were getting close there for a minute, the last bit of this year, I need to talk to you about LIV Golf and the impact that it's had. I mean, you've observed, like everybody else. Do you see a solution to this, and where do you think we're headed? And nobody likes where we are right now, but what's your feelings?
Well, first of all, the European Tour, now the DP World Tour, I was a founder member of that in 71, and it was difficult, and it didn't look like we were going to succeed.
Yeah.
And the whole prize money for the year was 1 million. That's for all the tournaments added
Everything,
together.
yeah.
So you were never going to make a living out of it. The PGA Tour, I mean, the success they've had over 50 years, they have a pension fund that's the envy of the business world in the United States. The prize money has gone up considerably every year, obviously a tremendous boost when Tiger appeared. And I look at a player like Dustin Johnson, 38, Bryson DeChambeau 10 years younger or so. And I think, why would you leave that when you've got 47 tournaments? You can play as many as you want. You probably have to play 15 to be a member.
See, I would argue that's too many, though.
Well, without
Too much
question.
golf.
We don't have an off-season. I mean, everyone says the NFL, has their off-season. They're champing at the bit for it to come back.
Yeah.
We don't. We just continue over,
Yeah.
and that's a mistake.
And I don't think the PGA Tour is far from above criticism in all of this. I mean, this is done for Golf Australia magazine, promote this podcast. The Australian Tour has been decimated by the attitude and, I would argue, arrogance of the PGA Tour, and it's not alone. And they've just taken over,
Yeah, but if they had an off-season...
That's right. That's why they should have an off-season.
South Africa,
Yeah.
Australia,
Yeah.
Japan are back in.
We'd
and
all
then
get
we've got
their-
a world game again.
Get their share, yeah.
So I wouldn't criticise them too much for that, but I would just say you have too many tournaments.
Yeah.
And I think the DP World has too many tournaments. It's too easy to keep your cart.
Yeah.
Yes. Be better with a short
Yeah, I
season.
remember a pal of mine, Raymond Russell, who didn't play in the tour anymore. But he, back in the day, I remember him telling me, he says, if you start the season on the European Tour with a fully exempt and can play whatever you want, and you lose your card, you have played rubbish.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also 125 players shouldn't retain their card.
No, it's too many.
You should have a bigger influx because the Corn Ferry Tour is such a good tour. Mm-hmm. And you should have 50 of them coming in. A whole lot.
Yeah.
And cut it down to, I think maybe 75, 80 would be okay.
Do you think all of those things together that we've touched on there are contributing to the fact that they were vulnerable to somebody like LIV coming along?
I think so. But to finish the story with the other two, they leave their house on a Tuesday. They got the steps of a private jet. At the bottom of the steps of the private jet on arrival, there's a nice shiny new top-of-the-range Genesis or Mercedes or BMW. You drive that to your 5-star hotel. You play golf the next day. You maybe do half an hour media stuff. Let's say you finish in the top 5. Sunday night, you go back with the car to the foot of the steps, you go back in the private jet, and you're home to see the kids, at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I don't know why you'd want to get away from that.
Yeah.
But having said that, we live in a world hopefully of freedom and freedom of choice, and you should never take away the choice from anybody. And I have no problems with those who have chosen LIV. They've said they want to see more of their family. The schedule was the big thing for them. 8 tournaments this year, 14 next year. It means I can spend more time fishing for the likes of Cameron Smith.
Yeah.
That was his quote.
Yeah.
I haven't got any problem with that at all. But then 2 or 3 weeks later, they want to play on the DP World Tour, they want to play on the PGA Tour, they want to play in the Ryder Cup and the President's Cup. Well, hang on, you're now into 32, 33 tournaments a year, and the whole thing for you joining LIV was the schedule, that you would have more time. You didn't say the money was, and I think if you're happy with the money, you're happy with the tour, and you're comfortable with from where the money comes from, then go your own way.
What would you have done? It's a unfair question, maybe.
No, there's not enough money.
With the right
printed
offer, would you have done it?
There's not enough money printed in the world for me to, because I think once you join that, you're part of that. And I have Saudi Arabian friends who have been pilots and they live quite near me. and I'm quite close to them. But when I see what goes on in Saudi Arabia, I don't want to be part of that. If that's what you do, it's your country.
Yeah.
And for all those who have joined, they're part of that now. And whether there'll be a way back, they go on about world ranking points. Rory earlier this week, while up at the Dunhill, he turned around and said it could be a year or two before all that happens, because it's the way the point system works. Yeah. Do you want points, world ranking points for 54 holes, shotgun start? I mean, the last time I did that was the family foursomes at Babberton.
Yeah.
Shotgun start.
Yeah.
It's not professional golf. A lot of television companies have distanced themselves from covering it. It looks like Fox Sports might be a runner in the States. How difficult is it going to be to cover the golf? Because the guy might not finish at 18.
Yeah.
You might have someone like Miliozzi who had that weekend in France and I think was at one point 12 shots behind.
He was 13 behind at the halfway stage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he comes through. Now, if he was 13 behind going into the last two rounds, his starting point would probably be the 8th or the 14th.
I must admit, I do laugh at this argument that it's fairer, in inverted commas, the shotgun start because everybody's on the course at the same time. But the hard holes determine how, if you're starting if you take Sawgrass as an example, if you're starting on the 18th, I'd rather play the 18th as maybe the 6th or 7th, and you're into standing on the first tee at the 8th and thinking, that's not an equal game.
No, and also sleeping on a lead over 4 days is part of what golf is. There's 72-hole stroke play events, most of them, whether you like that or not, doesn't matter. That's what they are. And you go into Sunday and you last off, and the whole field's gone round the golf course, so the greens aren't as pristine as they were in the early part of the day. But that's it.
Yeah.
That's what you have to do to win.
Yeah.
You have to master that. And I agree with you about Sawgrass. I mean, if you took 7 and it was the 6th, though, you've got time to recover.
Yeah, exactly.
But you haven't got any time. And you look at these last 3 holes, I mean, anything can happen.
Yeah.
Anything.
Yeah. How do you feel about, I've known Henrik Stenson a long time, and you have too, probably. A good guy. Always been a good guy. I've liked him. He's done a lot of good things in the game, juniors and all the rest of it. And he goes to LIV in the Ryder Cup thing. Captaincy, I think he deserved to be criticised over that, certainly. But I have a slight problem with the fact that this Henrik Stenson is now suddenly a bad guy because of one decision he's made in his life.
Henrik will never be a bad guy.
No, but then the Swedish Golf Federation have just turned round and thrown him out.
The mistake Henrik made was accepting the Ryder Cup captaincy.
Yeah.
Because he knew what was going on. I mean, there was whispers in the paper.
Yeah.
There are no whispers unless there's some truth in it.
Yeah.
And he shouldn't have accepted that. He should have just said, what is he, 46?
He's in that black hole that I call it, between 45 and 50 for pros.
Yeah, he should have maybe just said, look, a couple of years' time, I'll be with you.
Yeah.
And then if he goes to LIV, it's not a problem. I'm upset that his homeland has banned it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a cruel and unusual punishment, which is maybe sounds silly given we're talking about Saudi Arabians, but I do have a hard time just suddenly dismissing somebody like him, and he's just an example.
Yeah,
he's suddenly a bad guy now. Well, he's done. Look at all the good things he's done.
And Sweden's first male major champion. He's achieved so much, and it hasn't been easy for Henrik. There's 2 times in his career where he's lost his game. Yeah, and he's found the courage and the determination and the class and the work ethic.
Yeah, I mean, he couldn't hit the world at one point.
No. In 02, 01 and 02, I mean, he couldn't find a fairway. But no, he's not become a bad guy overnight. The mistake was accepting the Ryder Cup captaincy. LIV absolutely thrilled because they've taken the European Ryder Cup captain away. And that, sadly, is the battleground we're in right now.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen? Does America want to get involved with Saudi Arabia, given the history? Probably not.
Yeah. So what's the solution? Is there a solution?
Well, does Europe then become part of a rest of the world tour, and you have the PGA Tour?
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I see it, maybe not happening in my lifetime, but the way I see it is that that the PGA Tour will remain pretty much as it is, hopefully shorter, and the rest of the World Tour will then be able to get Australia back in business. I mean, you ask all the players from my era, Australia, Andrew Coulthard I'm working with this week. Andrew won the PGA down there. David Howell, I think, won.
And Sam did as well, didn't he?
And Sam. I mean, they used to say, oh, great, we're going to Australia because the courses are outstanding.
Yeah.
It's a sporting country.
They speak English, sort of.
Yes. And
Sorry, folks.
and the people of Australia love welcoming other sportsmen, as they have in cricket, as they have in rugby, and all the other...
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge... Obviously, it goes without saying.
Yeah, it's just a great sporting country. And if they were centre stage for a month, and then Japan for a little while, 2-3 weeks maybe, there's the chance of China. You've got Korea, who are supplying so many wonderful golfers in this modern era. Maybe a couple of weeks there. South Africa might be part of that.
Well, I'd long argued, before all this LIV stuff happened, I'd long argued that the European Tour should have gotten into bed with the Asian Tour and others and made as you just said, a rest of the world tour other than America. That would have been competitive with the PGA Tour.
And that doesn't mean that you can't go and play in the PGA Tour, and it doesn't mean that from the PGA Tour you can't go and play in the rest of the world tour. Yeah. But it's like the baseball thing in America. They call it the World Series. I mean, what?
I know.
You know, the world doesn't end at Jacksonville, and it doesn't end in Los Angeles.
But it does, Ewan, for a lot of people.
Well, I think they have to look at that and think, like, you asked if there'll be a solution. The only solution I can see is that the rest of the World Tour, which includes the DP World Tour, Australian Tour, Australasian Tour, the Asian Tour, the Japanese Tour, imagine how strong that would be.
Exactly. That's always been my argument.
Yeah, and the beautiful courses, the different cultures. Imagine the next generation of golfers saying, look, you can play in Thailand, you can play in Indonesia, you can go and play in Fiji if they've got a golf course here, and we'll have all of these things. And maybe if you don't want to go to Japan, you can go to Australia for 4 weeks and make your home there. That's the only compromise I can see. Yeah. But the people who have taken the money, I look at the players who haven't taken the money, and there's an animosity there, understandably so. And how is that going to pan out? But this is not going to be sorted in a year or 6 months. This is going to take longer than that. And hopefully at the end of it, the world is involved once again with golf. And America can still have their PGA Tour. Yeah. And they need to learn. They need an off-season. It's healthy to have an off-season. And not 125 exempt. You know, make the influx bigger. Yeah. So there's younger players coming in all the time. Yeah. And for those who are between 80 and 125, they haven't played that well.
No.
You know? I mean, it's 120,000 for 10th place.
Yeah.
And $1 million gets you cart.
I know. I mean,
so they haven't really played.
Look at the money Pat Perez has won since he went to LIV. I mean,
you've
got to laugh in a way.
I kind of understand them.
Yeah.
46, they've been offered a whole lot of money. Yeah. But don't then come back and say, but I want to play there as well.
Yeah. You know, Lee Westwood makes perfect sense to me that he went. He's no interest in playing the PGA Tour anymore.
No.
And he just wants to play a lesson and enjoy his life. And he's past his best. He's not as good as he used to be. He's still pretty good, but he's not as good as he was.
Yeah, and he's 50 in April, and he's done so much for the DP World Tour, / European Tour over the years. Do I want to watch Lee playing LIV Golf? No, because I saw him when he was 30, and he was outstanding. Yeah. I watched Mickelson for 30 years and loved every second of it, because like him, I never really knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And he gave so much to golf, Mickelson.
He was fun.
At that age, Pat Perez is 47. At that age, think, go. But when you go, focus on and support that tour. Don't then come back and say you want to play in the BMW PGA because the first prize is 1.3 million. And don't pick the best tournaments on the PGA Tour. And then there's the thing about the majors. What happens with them? But if you make the choice, you knew there was going to be possibilities that all of these things could happen, or some of them. Yeah. And they have. And for me, all the ones that have gone to LIV, no problem with that whatsoever. But focus on and support LIV and make that a success. The other tours are part of your history.
Seems like a good place to stop, Ewan. Thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure. Very interesting chat over the last hour and 18 minutes, believe it or not.
Yeah, we could go on forever because we're both sort of steeped in the game the same way. I just hope that the listeners don't think that we're fuddy-duddies.
Oh, but we are. We are. How are we doing up to that?
Well, as a commentator, I've had to move with the times anyway. You have to move with the spin rates and the launch angles, which, I mean, I still think the golf ball's the best coach in the game. But I'm not really looking back saying, oh, it wasn't at the good old days. But the game was better for what we had.
Yeah.
And what we have now is not an improvement.
No, I'm with you on that. And on that note, Ewan, thanks for your time.
Some fascinating stuff there from Ewen Murray, and no doubt he's made himself even more popular in this part of the world with his kind words about Bob Shearer, Ian Stanley, Jack Newton, among others. Well, that's it for this episode of the pod, but I hope you're following along because on our next, we shift gears for a chat with a young woman making waves in the golf architecture space.
It's really hard to justify having a golf course in a lot of places, in my opinion, and if we're just playing it for a sport, then maybe it's not worth it. But if there's value in what it can bring to the community or how it can help a person's mental health or physical health, then those kind of social impact offerings make a golf course more valuable and more worthy of the land usage, the water usage, etc.
That's Canada's Christine Fraser. Next time on The Thing About Golf.